All across South Africa's social media, you will find this: Black people celebrating victim pornography. It is the sort of it is the drug of choice for Black people in South Africa. Well, not just in South Africa, it's really a drug of choice for Black people around the world. Now, of course, I need to specify I am not talking about every single Black person. In fact, when you look at Willow, for example, here, who is a Black lady, she doesn't fall for any of this nonsense because she understands that she and she alone need to take responsibility for her own life. And therefore, she doesn't fall for this. But a lot of Black people do. A lot of Black people do hand themselves over to this constant need for victimhood status. And one of the things that has never made sense to me, one of the things that I have never been able to understand, is how 30 years later, most of these people posting this victim porn, 30 years onwards, they weren't even alive during this period of time. And yet, time and again, they blame something that happened over 30 years ago for every single one of its failures. Of course, the politicians in South Africa, like Julius Malema, like Jacob Zuma, like Cyril Ramaphosa, and literally every other Black politician mostly, although there are a number of white politicians that peddle the same lies to the Black population of South Africa. And it's no surprise that this really started the world over with Barack Obama being the president in the United States. Prior to Barack Obama becoming the president in the United States, Black and the relationship between Black and whites in America were actually incredibly good. Then Barack Obama comes to power, and Barack actually, in one of the most genius moves ever, guaranteed that the Democrats would never lose the Black vote, but also that the Democrats would have to do the least amount possible to maintain the Black vote. He sold Black people the drug of victimhood. Once they swallowed it, he had them. All the Democrats have to do is harp on about how much of a victim you are, and the Black people will just perpetuate this lie. This in spite of the fact that there was a Black president. This in spite of the fact that one of the greatest economists alive today, Thomas Sowell, is a Black man, and is proof that anyone can work themselves out of anything if they take responsibility for their own lives. But of course, the whole point of victimhood drugs is to get the user addicted. And in South Africa, we see that more than anywhere else. And that is why 30 years later, people who weren't even alive back then are still peddling the exact same lies. But why? Why is victimhood so incredibly powerful? Well, for that, I had to go really, to a number of studies that actually looked at the results of victimhood and what does self-pity do to a human being. With respect to personality, results showed strong associations of self-pity with neuroticism, particularly with the depression facet. With respect to control beliefs, individuals high in self-pity showed generalized externality beliefs, seeing themselves as controlled by both chance and powerful others. So people who suffer from self-pity will consistently view everything in this world as something happening to them. It's done by someone else or something else to them. This is why blaming apartheid is such an easy out, because I don't have to take responsibility for myself. But there's another study here, The Cure for Self-Pity in Psychology Today, where they actually wrote, trashing yourself is highly addictive, but like most addictions, it can be overcome. Now, I sort of looked even deeper into why is it so addictive, and ultimately, what it boils down to is when you feel sorry for yourself, your brain does this incredible thing because it's trying to make you feel better. It releases hormones that makes you feel like you're accomplishing something. So you feel a sense of accomplishment, even though you're not accomplishing anything. You're feeling sorry for yourself, right? But the brain wants you to feel good. And so it releases this hormone that makes you feel like you've just accomplished something. As a result of this, people get addicted to that feeling. It's on the one hand, it's incredibly sort of, I guess you could say, it's freeing, knowing that you are not in control of your own life, knowing that you can do nothing to save yourself and that everything that you do is completely in the hands of other people. But then at the same time, it's just as powerful to feel that sense of reward, that sense of self-pity, and the feeling that sort of gives you as you go through those emotions. This is why you, for example, will see posts all over the world, not just South African posts, but posts all over the world blaming systems, blaming people, blaming anything they can except themselves, right? These shacks are not the result of capitalism. These shacks in Cape Town, they're the result of the ANC. They're the result of incredibly bad policies by the ANC, and most of the people living in those shacks voted for the ANC. It is their fault that they are where they are. It is their fault that crime is as high as it is in their neighborhoods, because they're the ones turning to crime. They're the ones not voting for the right parties that will put work first, put economic growth first, and actually get them jobs. They are to blame for the circumstances that they are in, but it is easier. And as I've just shown you from studies, it feels better to just blame someone else and then play the victim, because then you get that sort of endless loop of good feelings. This is why a lot of these black people go to EFF rallies and they listen to Julius Malema speak, because Julius Malema is effectively a drug dealer. And every single time they go, they get intravenously just fed with this drug of victimhood. So they walk out of there feeling so good about themselves. But then there's another one that I found in my studies on this and looking and researching this topic that I found super, super interesting. And that is how addictive guilt can be. Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, as there are people who are very addicted to being victims, there are people who are very addicted to guilt. This is what you call the white leftist liberals, right? The white leftists, the people who are willing to flog themselves and basically lay themselves in front of the minority groups of the world and have these minority. You have white people in the UK, for example, that in spite of the fact that violent Muslim gangs are raping and murdering young white girls in Britain, there are white women in Britain still going, yeah, bring in more of these migrants because I am not a racist. And therefore, I will allow them to come and kill me and rape me because that's just how it is. It's guilt, and it's the addiction to guilt. It explains people like Bianca van Wyk. If you go through Bianca's posting, she is consistently flogging herself as this white oppressor. Now, Bianca is in many ways an oppressor. She oppresses my timeline constantly with her stupidity, but she still doesn't have to feel guilty about it. I could just block her, but then where would I get all the content from? But Bianca's entire timeline is basically this. It basically screams addict. And she's not the only one. Peter Kriel is another great example of a white person that is addicted to guilt. And I think the big problem, and this is a bit of speculation on my part, the big problem here is that it's sort of like an Ouroboros. It's the snake that's eating and feeding itself, effectively, because these addicts of guilt is constantly feeding the victimhood narrative to the addicts of victimhood, and the addicts of victimhood is constantly feeding guilt to the addicts of guilt. So it's this sort of unholy circular motion of the one group feeding the other one and just constantly destroying each other's chances of ever actually being happy. If we are to be very honest with each other, the failures of South Africa today is nothing to do with apartheid. White people are not to blame for it. You are to blame for it. Let me show you guys something. Here's Britain after the Second World War, completely destroyed. You go through these pictures, most of their cities leveled to the ground. Here's Japan, same thing. Here's Germany, same thing. The Afrikaners, after the First and the Second Boer War, they didn't have the luxury of saying, hey, you guys owe us reparations. They just had to get on with work, get on with life. There was no crying. All throughout history, tribes and peoples have suffered at the hands of others. Genghis Khan went slaughtering his way through all of Asia, all of China, most of Russia, and yet people just had to stand up and keep going. There was no reparations to be made. This was just life. And before people go, well, they got aid. Yeah, so did South Africa. We can't even find public records of just how much money South Africa has actually received from the rest of the world in terms of foreign aid. That's money that is owed to no one. They can literally just spend it and do whatever they want with it. If you just look at ChatGPT here, it's best estimate, and that's only because most of the foreign aid isn't exactly public, but it calculates that South Africa has at least received 24 billion US dollars in foreign aid from the rest of the world. That's money from the rest of the world that South African government can just do whatever it wants with, right? So it actually says that it could be way higher than that. So that's ChatGPT. Going over and looking at Grok, where it actually tries to do a bit of a better breakdown on this, you actually find that the cumulative total is about 25.3 billion US dollars that it has received in terms of foreign aid. But again, that would only be from the stuff that we can publicly see available. So the argument that, oh, these guys had help, yeah, so did South Africa. The difference between these guys and South Africa is that they actually stood up. They actually fixed their crap. Within 10 years, Germany was back to producing, back to making stuff. Within 10 years, the UK was back to producing, back to making stuff, back to building their country. Japan took 10 years and it was back to actually doing business. South Africa is worse off today than what it was in 1994. There are more unemployed people in South Africa today than what there were in 1994. There are more people on government benefits today than what there were in 1994. There are more people without homes today than what there were in 1994. The rand is weaker today than what it was in 1994. The economy is weaker today than what it was in 1994. Fundamentally, at its core, every single thing from now, right, back to 1994 is worse today than what it was in 1994. And I use 1994 because in 1994, all black people were free and equal to all white people. So you can't even say, well, at least we're free today. You were free in 1994. But in every other respect, your life has gotten worse, not better. And because of politicians understanding how easy it is to sell you the drug that you so crave, you are victims. And guess what's the one thing that all of my studies into this, all of my research into this, proves about victims and people who feel self-pity? They never actually achieve anything. One of the biggest predictors of failure in life is people who experience or have strong affections towards self-pity, because you're a victim. You can't save yourself. You need a savior. If you're a black person watching this, the time has come for you to take responsibility for your own life. It's been 30 years. You and you alone are to blame for what has happened in this country. You voted for the ANC, or you didn't, but it's your job to fix yourself. There's no handouts that's going to do that for you. We could give each of you R1 million and you would be poor in a year from now, because your mindset is that of a victim. You have not yet understood the fact that I was a victim. There were incredibly unjust things that happened to me 30 years ago. But that isn't going to fix my future. I have to take responsibility and fix my own future. I have to get a job. I have to start working hard. I have to get a wife, get a family, start focusing on the things that matter, and move forward in life. Go to church, read your Bible, connect with your Creator. That's how you solve your issues. Not by listening to politicians that have a vested interest in keeping you poor and keeping you a victim so that they can continue to get rich, selling you a lie and a drug that you are addicted to. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. As always, let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about this topic. Hit the like if you liked it, dislike if you didn't. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel. To become a patron, link in the description down below, or join button right below this video. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Take care.